No spin, no bias, no censorship. I'm Dan Wootton. Tonight, it's safe to say Lee Anderson's promotion to Conservative Party Deputy Chairman has rattled all the right people.
I look back fondly on the period of my life when I was unaware of Lee Anderson's existence.
Well, 30p Lee is a loose cannon and a liability.
In my digest next, I'll explain why the hatred being expressed towards Westminster's toughest talking MP, or Stand Up For Me Lee, as he's now known for backing the death penalty, shows the hatred of the left towards the working classes. In my superstar panel will weigh in. Joining me tonight, Dominique Samuels, Sean Bailey and Amy Nicol. And at 10:40, Fleet Street icon Calvin McKenzie will give his unfiltered view on Lee's call for capital punishment to return to save lawless Britain. Stay tuned for that. At 10:20, I'll bring you a world-exclusive interview with comedy legend John Cleese as he reveals bombshell news about the shock return of Fawlty Towers and takes aim at his woke critics in his first appearance on air here on GBNews. Will he allow the British Bashing Corporation to screen its most famous comedy again? Well, I'm going to ask him in just over an hour's time, so stay up with us tonight. Also coming up, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky made this unambiguous plea to Britain for even more military support yesterday.
The writing on the helmet reads, "We have freedom, give us wings to protect it."
And with Rishi Sunak paving the way to send those fighter jets to Ukraine, why is the potential escalation of the horrific conflict so readily accepted without any political debate? Well, we'll kick off the discussion the MSM refuses to have at 10. As the BBC continues its sick rehabilitation campaign for Shamima Begum, do you think the ISIS bride is a monster? Broadcaster Narinder Kaur dares to defend the terrorist against UKIP Deputy Leader Rebecca Jane. They're up in the clash at 9:20. With a US judge ordering the Sussexes to be grilled under oath. That was big news. Could Harry and Meghan's reputation be crushed by Samantha Markle's brave court case? Well, my royal masterminds, they have the inside story on this. Lady Colin Campbell and Phil Dampier analyse it all at 9:35. Plus, I'll speak to the journalist and author Ella Whelan about taking a sledgehammer to the BBC's trans echo chamber as it was left to her to stand up for women's rights on Question Time.
Is because if we let go of that, not only is it bad for women, and not only is it bad for collecting data, but it's also bad for trust in politics, because a lot of these lot are feeding you a whole load of nonsense.
She's live in the studio at 9:50. And on that note, as the US swimming star Riley Gaines exposes the horrific reality that biological women are now facing after she was forced to share a locker room with the trans competitor Leah Thomas.
Did not ask for our consent, but in that locker room, we turned around and there's a 6'4" biological man dropping his pants and watching us undress, and we're exposed to male genitalia.
More on that, as well as tomorrow's newspaper front pages, and Neil Oliver makes a special appearance as I crown the final greatest Britain and Union jackass of the week. This is Dan Wootton Tonight. Let's go. So one of the biggest stories of this week has been the return of Fawlty Towers. The wokerati hate it. They say it's going to be terrible. Well, to respond to speak for the first time about why he is bringing, I believe, the best comedy of all time back to television, John Cleese, here tonight. But before all of that, the news with Polly Middlehurst.
Dan, thank you. Good evening. More than 20,000 people are now known to have died after Monday's earthquakes in southern Turkey and northern Syria. Around 70 members of the UK's International Search and Rescue Team have joined the effort to try to find people in the rubble. Hundreds of thousands of people have been left homeless in freezing conditions, with the World Health Organization warning many more could die without shelter. British charities from today are appealing for funds to help those affected by the disaster, with the UK government saying it'll match up to £5 million to public donations. Lancashire police say their search for missing mother of two Nicola Bulley has moved now towards the sea. The force says it's now searching further downstream, where the River Wyre becomes tidal. Officers have also issued a 48-hour dispersal order for St Michael's-on-Wyre after an abandoned house was reportedly searched by members of the public trying to solve the case themselves, then posting footage on social media. The 45-year-old was last seen 13 days ago walking her dog. Now, members of Parliament will get a 2.9% pay increase from the 1st of April. That would bring their overall salary from around £84,000 to £86,000. The Independent Parliamentary Standards Authority says the pay increase for MPs was the same as the average increase in pay for public sector employees last year. Former Culture Secretary Nadine Dorries has announced she's standing down as an MP at the next general election. Ms Dorries, who represents Mid-Bedfordshire and has been an MP since 2005, said she's loved serving her constituents for the best part of 2 decades. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky has been addressing an EU summit in Brussels today. He's been lobbying leaders to provide more weapons to Ukraine in the fight against Russia, which he's referred to as the biggest anti-European force of the modern world. Here, Number 10 says it won't send fighter jets to Ukraine if that puts the UK at risk. Meanwhile, the Foreign and Defence Secretaries are in Rome meeting their Italian counterparts to discuss galvanising support for Ukraine. And lastly, Burt Bacharach, one of pop music's greatest ever composers, has died at the age of 94. He wrote hits like I Say a Little Prayer and Walk On By, as well as movie themes, including What's New Pussycat and The Look of Love. His publicist says Bacharach died surrounded by his family at his home in Los Angeles on Wednesday. You're up to date on TV, online and DAB+ radio. You're with GBNews. Now Dan Wootton has Dan Wootton Tonight.
How pathetically predictable. After a former miner turned red wall Tory who understands the real issues facing Brits today and is about as far from the Westminster establishment as you can get, well, after he becomes Tory party chairman, the MSM and political class go into overdrive to deride him, to mock him and to belittle him. The treatment of Lee Anderson, who coincidentally is a regular on this show, these past few days has exposed the left's hatred of the working class.
I look back fondly on the period of my life when I was unaware of Lee Anderson's existence. He's a bit like a sort of showerhead. He's like an out-of-control showerhead, and everyone's going to get wet. And at some point, someone's going to say, why did you put him in a more prominent position, Rishi Sunak?
Well, look, 30p Lee is a loose cannon and a liability.
Lee Anderson is a great example of what is wrong with the Conservative Party.
It was left to Penny Mordaunt in the House today to take on the 30p Lee clowns and unveil a far more appropriate moniker.
Many in her party like to refer to him as 30p Lee, but I can tell you his constituents and many people across the whole of the United Kingdom refer to him as he stands up for me, Lee.
Absolutely. Now, today's confected outrage is around the fact Lee backed the death penalty in an interview with The Spectator. He said nobody has ever committed a crime after being executed. You know that, don't you? 100% success rate. Now, Lee's position on capital punishment is not a secret. This is what he had to say on this very show last month about the illegal migrant who stabbed to death the aspiring Royal Marine after hoodwinking soft-touch authorities.
He's a creature, he's not a man. He's a creature that's murdered abroad, he's come here, he's told lies, he's been put in foster care, it's cost the British taxpayer thousands and thousands of pounds, and now we're going to put him in prison for 20 odd years. It's going to cost the British taxpayer thousands and thousands of pounds again. That's not the answer, and I think the answer is, and I'll say this with a heavy heart, it's probably at the end of a rope. I believe in the death penalty for cases like this.
So he's not hiding anything. But the hysteria today, of course, meant Rishi Sunak had to give in to the establishment and the MSM and rebuke what Lee was saying.
You say to your colleagues who want to bring back the death penalty in this country?
Well, that's not my view. That's not the government's view.
Now, the media coverage on this issue today would make you think Lee is somehow on the fringes of society. But that's simply not true. A YouGov poll from just last month found 52% of Brits think the death penalty should apply in cases of multiple murder, with 49% backing it for child murderers and terrorists, and 30% for all cases of murder. So even though I worry hugely about the risk of miscarriages of justice, as someone whose policeman uncle was killed by a violent career criminal, I understand why public support for the death penalty remains so high. Those politicians attacking Lee Anderson are actually attacking many of the people they are meant to represent. It's intellectual snobbery, pure and simple. To respond now, my superstar panel. Political commentator Dominique Samuels, the former Conservative London mayoral candidate Sean Bailey, and the writer and broadcaster Amy Nicol. Dominique, I think this is one of these stories where the political and the media class are completely out of touch with most of Britain, because I believe, tell me if I'm wrong, but I believe you are in the 50% of the country that thinks the death penalty is appropriate in some horrific cases.
Yeah, I believe it's completely appropriate for some horrific cases, particularly when it comes to depraved murders, and particularly depraved child murderers. And I think we have to put this into perspective here and think about what justice is, OK? The concept of justice. Let's take Ian Huntley, for example, you know, the man who committed the Moors murders. He's now dead. £10.4 million spent on keeping that creature alive. Let's move to John Venables, the murderer of the baby James Bulger. Millions again spent on reintegrating him into society, only for him then to re-offend. Does that sound like justice for you?
No.
Millions of taxpayers' cash being spent on keeping child rapists and murderers alive. I think that evil exists. I think that some people are beyond the pale, and it is, like Lee said, I'm sorry, the end of the road. What would you prefer, saving that money and spending it on the victims or people that really need it, or would you prefer spending millions of pounds on keeping scum, I don't even view them as human beings, alive? And look, OK, there are cases where it shouldn't apply. I understand that there are cases where people are falsely accused, but there is, when you know, without a shadow of a doubt, and in these particular cases we knew, then of course I think the death penalty should be an option, 100%.
Sean Bailey, I think the issue is that you see today how the media, and actually, I hate to say it, Sean, many MPs representing your party, the Conservative Party, are just completely out of touch.
Look,
with the people.
I don't happen to agree with Lee's views on the death penalty. I think a vengeful state sends the wrong message to the people of that country. But of course, he's an MP and he's a member of our society and he's entitled to his view. What really disappointed me is the way that the media then tried to associate his working class roots with being thick, his working class roots with not understanding budgets. That, to me...
There's a war on Lee Anderson, isn't there?
Yeah, and what it is, that reminded me of the way people were treated around Brexit. You know, all of a sudden you were thick if you didn't vote to remain, all of those kind of things. It's the kind of things people said to women and black people when they didn't want to give them the vote.
And you know the reason they really hate Lee Anderson, Amy? Because he was a member of the Labour Party for a long time. He was a miner. He is someone who was poverty-stricken when he was trying to raise his family. And so what did he decide to do? He decided to walk to work every day. He was working 7 days a week, by the way. He decided to sell his car and walk to work 7 days a week so he could feed his family. This is a man who is genuinely in touch with the Red Wall. And I think the sneering and the belittling and the mockery of Lee Anderson shames your side of politics, because what it actually shows is that you are embarrassed of the working classes.
That is absurd. I speak... No one has a problem with how he says things. We have a problem with what he says. And if you talk about what he stands for, who he stands for, well, it's certainly not people in poverty. It's certainly not travellers. It's certainly not Steve Bray, is it, when he smacked his hat off? And it's certainly not that little chap from the Disabled Alliance. So I think it's absolutely ridiculous and very rich coming from you.
He does stand up for poverty.
Someone who revels
people
and relishes taking the mick out of Angela Rayner's accent, which
When have I ever
plenty of
done
the
that?
viewers do as well.
When have I ever done that? No.
Regularly. Regularly do
I've never
conservative...
taken the piss out of Angela Rayner's accent. I've regularly spoken about her as a politician who is not suitable for high office because of the way that she referred to all members of the Tory party as scum, and actually a lot worse. But I've never once mocked her accent.
Well,
and go away and fight, because you've said it's happened multiple times. No, after this, you've got 45 minutes. Go away and find me one example of when I have mocked Angela Rayner's accent. And you bring it back. You bring it back because you've just made a completely inaccurate and untrue claim live on air. So I want to see the evidence of me mocking Angela Rayner's accent. Thank you.
Dan Wootton, you regularly mock Angela Rayner as a politician. Now,
you said
if
I'd mocked her accent.
I didn't. I said you mock her working class roots, as do much of the right.
No, you said I'd mocked her accent.
Whereas the criticisms of Lee Anderson, and the key thing about Angela Rayner is she apologised for what she said at Tory, and she apologised for it. Lee Anderson is yet
she
to
apologised
apologise.
because she was poor.
Lee Anderson has defended his 30p comments. He's defended what he said about travellers, and he's defended what he said to Steve Bray and the guy from the Disabled Alliance. He has no apologies, and just today he's attacked a presenter from the BBC verbally.
Amy, all of that is irrelevant when you think about what has been done and said about Lee Anderson. This feels like an attack on people who are not from the upper middle class. But that's what it feels like to people.
It's an attack on people who are unpleasant.
That's what it feels like to people who are from a working class background. He has some resonance with them, great resonance. And when he's spoken about in this way, when he's referred to as being thick, it stings because they are the people that it feels like it's being directed at.
Yeah, and it's coming from this familiar group of people that did the same sneering, the same looking down upon people that voted Brexit. And I don't think it's a coincidence that Lee is clearly working class, he's straight talking, and they are gunning for him. Yeah. And look, you don't have to agree with every single thing Lee says, but it's refreshing, objectively, to hear a politician just saying what they feel and speaking frankly, rather than running rings around themselves to try and not be attacked by the mainstream media. And when you do talk frankly to people and say it how it is, the result is you get bullies like James O'Brien attacking you and talking down on you on his little LBC show.
I'm sorry, but saying it like it is not an excuse to be regressive, simplistic, and completely reduce everything into a really simplistic binary, which doesn't exist.
If it's regressive, that's your opinion. The part that stings, the part that James O'Brien will have to reflect on, he linked Lee's existence, his comments, his feelings, the way in which he presents himself, to being thick. And James O'Brien is someone James O'Brien is someone who trades on his own working class background. So you'd expect some kind of solidarity there, some kind of understanding.
As if he has a working class background. He never, ever claimed
He does claim that he came from.
Dominique's having Sean Bailey, Amy Nicole, you've got some work to do. You've got some work to do.
You criticising Angela Rayner won't take me very long.
No. You said I'd mocked her accent.
I said those on the right
and I'd mocked her for being
accent.
working class. No, you didn't. You didn't say that. So you go away, please, and when you come back at 10 o'clock, I expect that you'll have some evidence of me doing that. But she won't, because it never happened. But still to come, as Harry and Meghan face a possible grilling under oath in a US court, could Samantha Markle's bold case be Waterloo for the runaway royals? My masterminds on this, Lady Colin Campbell and Phil Dampier, have the inside story at 9:35. But first, in tonight's clash with the BBC, seemingly determined to rehabilitate Shamima Begum's shattered public image, do you think the ISIS bride is a monster? Broadcaster Narinder Kaur goes head-to-head with the UKIP Deputy Leader, Rebecca Jane. That's straight off the rake. But, of course, your opinion on this matters more to me. So email me, dan@gbnews.uk. Vote in our poll at GB News. The results coming up after the break.
He's the king of breakfast TV, and he's back.
Eamon Holmes, back on the TV with me this morning.
Even remember my name.
I know, it's been 4 months. You have holy water by your bed?
Oh, yes.
Oh,
already to bless.
Oh, Eamon. Oh.
Why do you not believe anything I say?
Eamon Holmes back on GB News Breakfast at 6 a.m.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even some ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit up.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions are, those days are gone, I can tell you. She's only teasing. Go on. He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes. How long? Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Jubes and Kerr. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
This year on GB News, we've got brand new members in the family.
Join us. Across the entire United Kingdom, we cover the issues that matter to you. GB News will always stay honest, balanced and fair. We want to hear whatever is on your mind.
And we don't talk down to you.
The establishment had their chance.
Now we're here to represent you. Britain's watching.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank. My father didn't love me. So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi, Andrew Pierce here. Join me every Friday lunchtime for a proper no-nonsense debrief of the week's events. With special guests in the studio and the GB News team on the ground, I'll be getting you up to date with news, some intelligent discussion and my own sharp take. The weekend starts here with me every Friday lunchtime on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Time now for The Clash. Magazine covers, TV specials, a podcast series outrageously claiming she's not a monster. The sickening campaign by the British bashing corporation, the dangerous hard left, to turn Shamima Begum into some sort of faultless celebrity just gets worse by the day. So this disingenuous podcast, I Am Not a Monster, plus the vomit-inducing 90-minute documentary called The Shamima Begum Story, has seen our so-called public broadcaster really turn into a propaganda machine for this stateless ghoul. Look at this.
I feel British because I feel like I wasn't able to be British even though I wanted to be, if that makes sense. I didn't feel like I was accepted by society either because of racism and other things. It's really hard wanting to integrate into society but your family holding you back. It's like when you're in love and you don't want to see the person's faults, so you just like push them to the back of your head, or you just completely deny that they are there, you know? Like I was in love with the idea of ISIS, so I just always made excuses for them.
So this war criminal expects us to believe her narcissistic narrative, thinking we will forget the heinous crimes she deliberately travelled to Syria to be involved in. So despite the BBC and left-wing establishment's best efforts to rehabilitate Shamima Begum in a deranged propaganda campaign, my question tonight, Do you still consider Shamima Begum to be a monster? Dan at gbnews.uk. Tweet me at GBNews. Our poll running there right now. But to battle this out, Deputy Leader of UKIP, Rebecca Jane, and the reality TV star and social commentator, Narinder Kaur. Rebecca Jane, I've got to be honest, the BBC, I'm not falling for it. I'm not falling for their sick propaganda campaign. It's very obvious to me that Shamima Begum is a monster, regardless of what they're trying to tell us.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more, Dan. For me, this woman is completing the ultimate terrorist attack, because what could be worse for ISIS? You know, that they already complete terrorist attacks and kill people in our country. What's even better for them is that they take one of our own, they transform her into their puppet. She then ends up coming back to Forgiving Britain. The BBC are doing a whole PR and marketing campaign for her, and therefore comes back and, in my opinion, could complete the biggest terrorist attack that we have ever seen in our lifetimes. We have to be incredibly careful about what is happening with this woman. Do I believe she's a monster? Yes, I do. I think that our children are in danger. I think society is in danger. And I think that the BBC have got a lot to answer for, and it needs to stop.
Narinder Kaur, how on earth can you defend Shamima Begum?
Well, you know, I was the same as you both before I saw this documentary, and this is an investigative piece of journalism where
it
they
wasn't,
shed...
Narinder. It's by one of her mates.
Dan, I watched this documentary and my mind was turned. And actually, there's a lot of questions that we all as a nation need to ask ourselves and take responsibility.
What?
A girl of 15 years old was groomed online, radicalised by grown men. Whose fault is that? The Bethnal Green Academy in 2014, 2 months before she left, conducted an assessment where they revealed to the police and warned them that Miss Begum, at 15 years of age, was at risk of being radicalised. She left 2 months later. Now, she's a 15-year-old.
So fault, is
My daughter is 15. They are impressionable. She is a victim here. This is not PR to turn her into celebrity. We need justice.
Narinder, if you watched that documentary, you would have also seen the true Shamima Begum. Before she got all of her PR advisors and her mates at the BBC telling her what to say in order to be allowed back into the country. Did you see how she reacted? Did you see how she reacted when she was asked by the journalist how she felt about the death of those British people, including the 8-year-old girl at the Manchester Arena bombing?
That was awful.
And she had no remorse.
She had no remorse, and that was obviously disgusting. However, she'd given birth 2 days earlier, and that journalist was actually quite... So your hormones are all over the place. That girl at 15 years old was actually not an ISIS bride. She was a child bride sold into sex slavery. We must open our eyes to the risk that our children are online here. She was groomed online. You cannot deny
Rebecca,
that. She was radicalised.
So this is the fault of the UK, you know, because we're some sort of racist hellhole.
I didn't say we're not going to bring race into it.
People.
Dan,
I'm not accepting that. That's what the documentary said. That's what Begum's saying, and you say you agree with the documentary.
The police had responsibility to the parents to tell them they knew.
Dan was talking to me. He's not talking to you. He's talking to me. If you give me a second, two-way conversation going on. So, yes, of course, it's always going to be Britain's fault and all the rest of it. You know what? I've got 2 daughters myself. At the grand old age of 6, they knew right from wrong. At the age of 10, they know if they commit a crime, they're off to prison. At the age of 15, they absolutely know if they clear off to Syria and join ISIS, there are going to be severe repercussions, and the chances are you're not allowed to get back in. And what's more, the point that I would like to make of all of this, she's clearly posing a risk to our people of our country, our children, our family and our friends.
She can help. She can be brought back.
I'm not done. Narinder, stop. I'm not done. While there is that small risk, whatever, even if it's a huge risk, why should we even take 1% and let it back in?
Because Rebecca, she was 15, and legally and morally, we have a responsibility.
So you know better.
Let a judge decide.
Than MI5. You know better than the Home Office. You know better than Sajid Javid, the Home Secretary at the time, who said, if you know what I know, you would understand.
We don't know what they know.
Allowing Shamima Begum back into the country.
I'd say let a judge decide. I'd say let a judge, a UK judge, decide. Because at the end of the day, she's a British born. She should not be stateless. She should have a citizenship brought back and tried in this country. That is what should happen. Because so Rebecca, I've got a 15-year-old daughter. My 15-year-old, wait till your daughters get a bit older, they are impressionable. Yes, she hasn't had the advantages your daughter have had. You've got to look at her background, her class, and everything she's gone through in life. We don't know. She was vulnerable. So are you saying a 15-year-old girl can't be...
OK, Narendra, let Rebecca respond to that, please.
You've got no idea what my children have been through. You've got no idea what I've been through. You can talk about your own experience, but don't talk about mine for me. I want to protect my children. You've even just said about my, when my daughters grow up. She's 16.
OK, so Narendra Kaur knows better than MI5 about whether Shamima Begum poses a risk to our national security, do you? I'd
say let a UK judge decide. That is what as a nation, we need to look at the responsibility we hold to our girls who are under the age of 16 and vulnerable to online grooming. It is clear she was radicalised. Have a heart, yes? She did some stupid things. We are not condoning what she did. She did some, but she was a benign. She was a benign member.
It's very interesting. I will just make one final point. It's very interesting that you're so focused on the rehabilitation of Shamima Begum. Do you also believe in the rehabilitation of jihadi Jack Betts, who was a white, middle-class teenager from Oxford,
why not? Yes.
Who was radicalised?
Yes, why not? They should. If they were underage. Shamima Begum was 15 years old. She was underage. It's a legal fact.
You can go and join a death cult that's going to conduct the beheadings of British aid workers.
She was a benign member.
Teenagers.
She was a benign member.
And then you can be welcomed back into the country.
Tried into this country.
Society is
not welcomed back. Not welcomed back, and not a celebrity.
Thank you so much for the debate. Reality TV star, social commentator Narendra Kaur, and the deputy leader of the UKIP party, Rebecca James. So who do you agree with on this? Is former ISIS bride Shamima Begum a monster? Stuart says she was a victim of grooming, and we in the UK are on a nation built on Christian values. We should remember the power of forgiveness. So he's very much with Narendra on this. Connie says, personally, I couldn't say. She did a very bad thing, but people often do, especially young people. But from John, Begum is clearly a monster. Anyone who calmly accepts religious executions as the means to power is one. And your verdict is now in. 90% of you believe Shamima Begum is a monster. Just 10% of you saying she's not. Now, coming up, as journalist and author Ella Whelan found herself fighting to speak up for women's rights as she was recorded in the BBC studio on Question Time. She'll take a sledgehammer to the corporation's trans echo chamber at 9:50. But our royal masterminds are up next, and with a US judge ordering Harry and Meghan to be quizzed under oath, could the Sussexes' carefully created reputation be ruined by Samantha Markle's brave legal challenge? Lady Colin Campbell, Phil Dampier, they're with me straight after the break. Don't go anywhere.
This year on GB News, we've got brand new members in the family.
Join us. Across the entire United Kingdom, we cover the issues that matter to you. GB News will always stay honest, balanced and fair. We want to hear whatever is on your mind.
And we don't talk down to you.
The establishment had their chance.
Now we're here to represent you.
Britain's watching.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, right across the nation. You can get us on television, on radio, on digital. We're absolutely everywhere.
Amazing. You see, amazing.
You remind me of me in the European Parliament. But here's the most important bit. We are not part of the mainstream establishment. We think and speak just like you do. We are the People's Channel.
Magnificent. That's really, really thoughtful.
Come and join us on GB News, the People's News Channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. We are GB News, the People's Channel.
Why not take us home with you by visiting the GB News shop at gbnews.store. You'll find all the official merchandise, a really good present actually for yourself, your friends or your family.
We ship across the UK mainland at no extra cost. GB News, the People's Channel.
Join me, Lawrence Fox, on GB News. Frank, fun, fearless and sometimes serious. Much as I love a Friday night punch-up, what I really want is a battle of ideas. I want to look at things differently. I want to hear different voices and engage with your unique experiences. Every Friday at 7 p.m. on GB News.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank. My father didn't love me. So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and tune-in apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
It's time now to get the latest from my royal masterminds, Lady Colin Campbell and Phil Dampier. And after a bombshell ruling by a US judge, the Duchess of Sussex has lost her legal battle to avoid giving evidence in a defamation case brought by her sister, Samantha Markle. Samantha wants $75,000 in damages over what she says were false and malicious lies told by the Sussexes in that infamous Oprah Winfrey interview in March 2021, as well as the hagiography Finding Freedom by that really odd little bloke, you know who I mean, Omid Scobie. If the case makes it to court, then both Meghan and Harry will be forced to be grilled in depositions under oath. Now, it may well be very difficult for them, Lady Colin Campbell. You know a lot about this case, don't you? You have the inside running on this, so what is your verdict?
Well, I wouldn't say I have total inside running, but I do have some because I've been assisting Samantha, because various very well-placed people have been in touch with me because they're intent on making sure that justice prevails and that the truth will see the light of day. And they have had their lawyers, and I'm speaking about people at the absolute top level of society, internationally, who have been calling in legal brains from all over the world. And they have been giving me information which I have been feeding to Samantha, because the reality is that Meghan and, to a lesser extent, Harry, need to be put in a position where they will be forced to speak the truth or face the consequences. Because if they are deposed and they tell lies, they can be charged with perjury and might even end up in prison. I think it's a very remote possibility, but it is a possibility nevertheless, and they and their lawyers will be aware of it. Because the reality is that they have told so many lies, and this case is in no danger of being struck out. You know, Judge... I forget her name, Edwards Honeywell. She says that, you know, some of the claims might be struck out, but in reality, the substance of the claim is sufficiently sound that Harry and Meghan have to give depositions under oath being televised, being taped. I mean, we have the prospect of Meghan going the Amber Heard route, and that's not a very pretty sight.
And Phil Dampier, I think the key point that Lady C makes there is that for a long time, in many sort of establishment circles, this case was dismissed. They love to dismiss Samantha Markle, don't they? Because she isn't on their side of politics. But actually, she's proven over numerous years, and I am happy to say this, that she is a woman of impeccable character. I believe she has always told the truth. And all of a sudden, Phil, this is looking pretty serious for Harry and Meghan now, because as Lady C says, this case may not be struck off.
Yeah, good evening, Dan. I'll tell you what, if there's two people I wouldn't want to be up against who've got together, it's Lady C and Samantha Markle. I mean, what a
so true.
What a combination. I mean, honestly, I would not like to meet them in court. But no, Harry and Meghan are great at starting the legal actions, aren't they? So it's going to be fascinating to see what they're like when they're on the receiving end. I mean, to be honest, $75,000 isn't that much, so I wouldn't be surprised if Harry and Meghan try and settle this out of court, is what I would do. But I think, Lady C's right. Samantha Markle's got the bit between her teeth, and she wants to call her own father as one of the witnesses. She wants them to admit that she wants Harry and Meghan to admit that the Queen wasn't a racist and that King Charles isn't a racist. So it could be an incredible court case. And of course, a really good lawyer could make them really kick them around in court and put them on the spot. It could be very, very nasty for them if it goes ahead.
Of course, and it is important that you do mention Thomas Markle, because before he had his really unfortunate stroke, which at the moment has robbed him of his ability to speak, he appeared on this show and said he would absolutely appear in court to back Samantha Markle in this case. So he remains a key part of the case as well. Look, I want to move on to the coronation now, because if Harry and Meghan do attend in May, they may well be denied the spotlight they so desperately crave. So this is according to Vanity Fair magazine, that says the Sussexes can expect to be treated like Princesses Beatrice and Eugenie. So they will attend royal events but won't be visible or appear on the Buckingham Palace balcony. Lady C, what do you make of this report?
Well, the reality is, of course, if Harry and Meghan do end up coming, and there is some doubt that they will, but my understanding is that it is possible, indeed, maybe even likely, that at least he will come and possibly she. They need to be treated with sufficient respect, as would be warranted by their position. But the reality is, coronations used to be done by presidents. Your precedence was in your order of succession to the throne, and also, the royal dukes were not seated with the royal duchesses; they were kept separate. So it will be very interesting to see what the king comes up with, because, of course, he is changing things and modernizing things. So let's see what he comes up with.
Phil Dampier, do you think Harry and Meghan would actually accept that scenario? Because that's the only flaw to me in this whole reportage. They might not come if they know they're going to be treated like Beatrice and Eugenie.
Well, if they don't come, I think that's good and we'll all be glad. But if they do come, I think they should be treated like Beatrice and Eugenie. In fact, I think they should actually sit with them, because they're actually quite friendly with them. I mean, Eugenie was out in Canada when their romance was first revealed to the world. Even been a report recently she might want to move out to California and live near them. So she's still quite friendly with them. So they could have a bit of a chat, they could get on all right. And I think they would be, it would be appropriate for them all to be together. I mean, at some point, Harry and Meghan have got to realise they're no longer working royals. They're not up in the pecking order. They're very lucky to still have their titles and be in the line of succession, to be honest. So, I think that's where they should be. Second row back, third row back with B and Eugenie. Treat them exactly the same. Minor royals.
Very good point. Brilliant insight, as ever, from our sensational royal masterminds, Lady Colin Campbell and Phil Dampier, who will be back next week. Thank you both. But coming up in tonight's Media Buzz, as Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky demands multi-million-pound jets from the UK, do we have no choice but to agree? Or could we be sleepwalking into some sort of dangerous escalation here? My superstar panel going to give my thoughts on this, plus we'll have tomorrow's newspaper front pages straight after 10. But first, after single-handedly wiping the floor in the trans echo chamber of Question Time last week, journalist and author Ella Whelan is going to join me to reveal what really happened straight after the break.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, right across the nation. You can get us on television, on radio, on digital. We're absolutely everywhere.
Amazing. You see, amazing.
You remind me of me in the European Parliament. But here's the most important bit. We are not part of the mainstream establishment. We think and speak just like you do. We are the People's Channel.
Magnificent. That's really, really thoughtful.
Come and join us on GB News, the People's News Channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prisons?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed. So I guess they've always been quite woke. That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
This year on GB News, we've got brand new members in the family.
Join us. Across the entire United Kingdom, we cover the issues that matter to you. GB News will always stay honest, balanced and fair. We want to hear whatever is on your mind.
And we don't talk down to you.
The establishment had their chance.
Now we're here to represent you.
Britain's watching.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Ella Whelan is tonight's outsider. Now, at First Minister's Question today, Scottish Conservative leader Douglas Ross grilled Scheming Sturgeon as to how the dangerous double rapist Adam Graham was allowed to enter a women's prison. Watch.
The First Minister says she doesn't have enough information to decide if this double rapist is a man. He's a rapist. He has a penis. What further information can the First Minister possibly need? When he comes out of jail, will Nicola Sturgeon and her government consider him a man or a woman?
As always, Queen Nick refused to answer that very simple question, despite the fact the Scottish public are in opposition to her trans extremism. And that was plain to see when the pompous and biased debate show Question Time visited Strathclyde University in Glasgow. The panel of the show comprised of the trans woman Indy Willoughby and the woke political establishment on the whole. So it was left to the journalist and author, the brilliant Ella Whelan, to stand up for Women's Rights Watch.
And the reason why it's important to stand by the idea of fact being able to, something that you can hold in your hands in society, is because if we let go of that, not only is it bad for women, and not only is it bad for collecting data, but it's also bad for trust in politics, because a lot of these lot are feeding you a whole load of nonsense.
Okay.
I mean, this is essentially what you would hear in 1970s about gay couples, and that it was totally unnatural for a man to be with another man or a woman to be with another woman. It's the same conversation rehashed and dressed up in a completely different way.
So, Ella, this was an absolutely fascinating conversation, I found, because up until now, the British Bashing Corporation, as I call them, just don't tend to have these trans debates. And I guess you sort of brought a sledgehammer to the orthodoxy that has developed around these issues on the Beeb. How were you treated by them afterwards?
Well, I'm much more of a fan of the BBC than you are. I actually think that the Question Time team are to be commended because no matter which way you cut it, this is an issue that strikes fear into the heart of broadcasters, and you know, it was run
it was a
very
brave move.
I think that it was a step in a different direction. That you're right, the BBC has up until now been overcautious about talking about this. Perhaps some people might say it has been cowed, but there was, you know, this was it was very professionally run. It was, everybody was given their fair hearing, and actually there was a really interesting moment where we were discussing the case of Adam Graham, who now calls himself Isla Bryson, and I was the last to come in, and everybody had used the name Isla Bryson up until that point. And when I used his name Adam Graham, Fiona Bruce said, you know, who now calls himself Isla Bryson, which is fair enough. But in previous moments, that would have been described as dead naming and it would have been shut down. But I think the Question Time team and lots of other broadcasters now realise that, particularly in this case, but also more broadly, you know, it is not bigoted to talk about sex as true and irrefutable. So I think they're to be commended.
Indeed, and I think, thank goodness they did have your voice there. I would say that Fiona Bruce appeared, as a viewer at least, to be incredibly nervous with the conversation. There were numerous times when she tried to dial it down. But I wanted to show you, you'll obviously remember this, but in case you didn't see this, there was a really fascinating moment when a member of the audience came out to support Ella's position against India Willoughby. Watch what happened.
Don't allow men into female spaces. For good reason. There are good men and there are predatory men. We should not allow trans into female spaces.
So you're classing trans women as men?
There are good trans and there are predatory trans, and that's a fact. Women have to be safe. Women and children have to be safe. In my opinion, you can't change sex. That's my opinion.
Now, she had the support of the audience, from what I could tell. But again, that is not a view that the BBC will often put on air, because women like her have been derided now as either transphobes or TERFs by polite society, by the political establishment, whatever you want to call them, for the past few years. That felt like a very significant moment to me, her intervention.
It was, and it's a difficult one to get across because, you know, I think the vast majority of people understand and believe that not all trans, not even close to all trans people are a problem, you know, that actually, you know, you don't want to go down the rabbit hole of suggesting that, and this is where perhaps I disagree with some gender-critical feminists, that simply being in a space with a man causes a problem or is a danger. You know, there's, I'd actually quite like lots of areas of life to be far more unisex because, you know, it can get a bit tiresome just hanging out with women, you know. So I'm being silly, but, you know, in general, I think that we should avoid talking about this as a sort of a fear and a danger. But actually, that woman wasn't really doing that. What she was saying was, and, you know, actually a part of the clip was where she said, I remember her saying, I mean you no harm at all. And she wasn't... She wasn't feeding India Willoughby or any of the politicians full of nonsense. She was being truthful. She was saying, I don't have any kind of row with you. All I want to say is that sex is real. I don't think that you can change your sex, and therefore, if there are places in society where there's single sex, you know, for a reason, whether that's, I don't know, women of a religious faith wanting to go to the swimming pool at a certain time on their own, whether it's more intense spaces like rape crisis centres, or, you know, whether it's the fact that we know that because of the trials and tribulations of puberty, generally most teenagers don't want to get changed in front of one another, boys and girls.
No, indeed.
That's not a controversial thing to, or at least it shouldn't be a controversial thing to say.
No, indeed. Now look, it was interesting to me that the BBC chose to put India Willoughby on that panel to represent the trans side of things. I mean, you know, I absolutely don't believe in no platforming people, so fine if they want to do that. But I guess I was surprised because India Willoughby isn't a good face of the trans community. I mean, this is a woman who is an out-and-out Twitter troll. She is incredibly aggressive and personally attacks people who she disagrees with politically. So I was quite surprised that they gave her that position to be the face of the trans community, but they did. And she did, I guess, the old strategy of trying to say that you were essentially like a homophobe from the 1970s, which seems to be one of her big attack lines. What did you make of her appearance?
Well, look, I don't know India Willoughby. I don't know. I didn't get a chance to really meet with such a short space of time. I have nothing to say about her as a person. But in terms of the political point she made during our interaction on the show, the argument that this is just like homophobia of years gone by, the 70s and 80s, isn't true, because the thing that's markedly different is that gay people and lesbian people and that whole very progressive movement for an increase in civil liberties, an increase in people's rights, a sort of celebration of personal freedom, never pretended that something was that reality didn't exist. They never. The fundamental problem that most people have with the current trans discussion is not people dressing differently. It's not people calling themselves different names. It's not any of that. The vast majority of people have a problem with being forced to say what they know isn't true. That sex is real.
Biology, isn't it? Look, I just want to finally show you this great moment where you struggled to get a straight answer from an SNP politician. This was you questioning the Transport Minister, Jenny Gilruth.
This individual, a man or a woman?
I'm sorry, this individual is a rapist.
No. We know that. I want to know, is this individual a man or a woman?
Please? To make these
you haven't
decisions
answered
to
the question.
Our prison population safe. I have answered the question.
No, you haven't. You haven't. But can I just say, Fiona, if I can cut... the reason why I think this
give Jenny one more chance to answer the question?
Carry on, yeah.
Because the audience
I'd love to hear your answer. I really would.
This individual is a rapist. That is the most important thing.
She wouldn't answer, neither does Sturgeon, and that's their problem.
And it's just so pathetic. I mean, if you really do believe your own policy in relation to this gender reform bill, say that you think she's a woman and then face up to the consequences of that position. I think it's...
Exactly.
It's the end of the SNP.
Because that's what your law does, and I think it is. I think this is going to be the end of the line for the SNP because they are now denying reality and also denying the reality of their bill. Alan Whelan, well done. Thank you so much. Tell us the story. Now, coming up at 10:20, I'll bring you a world-exclusive interview with comedy legend John Cleese as he reveals bombshell news about the shock return of Fawlty Towers and takes aim at his woke critics in his first appearance here on GB News. Will he allow the British Bashing Corporation to screen its most famous comedy again? Well, I'm going to ask him in about 15 minutes' time, so don't go anywhere. But first, with Ukraine's President Zelensky demanding multi-million-pound jet fighters during his visit to Parliament, should we agree, or would this be a cost too far that risks escalating the conflict? And why is there zero debate on what is a really monumental decision? My superstars are going to tackle that, and we'll have the first of tomorrow's news pages. We're back in just 2 minutes' time.
He's the king of breakfast TV, and he's back. Eamon Holmes, back on the TV with me this morning.
Even remember my name.
I know, it's been 4 months. You have holy water by your bed?
Oh, yes. Already depressed.
Yeah. Oh, Eamon. Oh.
Why do you not believe anything I say?
Eamon Holmes back on GB News Breakfast at 6 a.m.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit up.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions those days are gone, I can tell you. She's only teasing. Go on. He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Jubes and Kerr. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
The guy went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions. I have no time for cultural totalitarianism. We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's 10 p.m. I'm Dan Wootton. Tonight, the left-wing establishment, Tory Wets and the MSM might be up in arms.
I look back fondly on the period of my life when I was unaware of Lee Anderson's existence.
Well, look, 30p Lee is a loose cannon and a liability.
But do you agree with Westminster's toughest talking MP and the new Tory Deputy Chairman, Lee Anderson, that we should bring back the death penalty? Fleet Street legend Calvin McKenzie certainly does, and he's going to be uncancelled on why at 10:40. Plus, in a world-exclusive interview, GB News' brand new presenter John Cleese speaks for the first time about the shock return of Fawlty Towers and hits back at the woke critics of the much-loved British sitcom. And with the bidding war in the offing, will the comeback series be screened on its original home, the British Bashing Corporation, otherwise known as the BBC? Well, I'm going to sit down with the legendary Monty Python comic in about 15 minutes' time, so do stand by for that. As President Zelensky pleads for the wings of freedom, should the UK supply Ukraine with multi-million-pound jets, or is this a cost too far that could actually end up escalating the conflict? Well, that's going to be a big debate with my superstar panel next. Tonight, I'm joined by Dominique Samuels, Sean Bailey and Amy Nicol. As civil rights activist Al Sharpton becomes the latest woke American to give his unsolicited views about the monarchy,
understood what Meghan was going through. It was somebody black working in the C-suites for the first time, and they treat you differently.
So is he right that Meghan Markle was treated in a racist way because she was the first black senior royal? And US swimming star Riley Gaines has exposed the horrific reality that biological women are now facing after she was forced to share a locker room with the trans competitor Leah Thomas.
Not asked for our consent, but in that locker room, we turned around and there's a 6'4" biological man dropping his pants and watching us undress, and we're exposed to male genitalia.
So our big royal racism debate and more on that shocking story will be coming up in the media buzz. And finally, I say bring back Boris to save the Conservative Party, but not everyone is happy to see him on the comeback trail. Find out why when I crown tonight's Greatest Britain and Union Jackass at 10:50. We're going to have a first look at the newspaper front pages in mere moments right after Polly Middlehurst.
Dan, thank you. Good evening. The top story on GB News tonight. More than 20,000 people are now known to have died after Monday's earthquakes in southern Turkey and northern Syria. Around 70 members of the UK International Search and Rescue Team have joined the effort to try to find survivors in the rubble. Hundreds of thousands of people have been left homeless in freezing conditions, with the World Health Organization warning many more could die without shelter. Prime Minister Rishi Sunak says the government is doing everything it can to help.
I, as a dad, watching parents try and find their young children in the rubble is heartbreaking. And we will do everything that we can to help Turkey. I already said that to the President when I spoke to him a couple of days ago. And what the government's also said is that we will match all of the country's donations pound for pound. So if anyone can give to the Disasters Emergency Committee, then the government will match your donation pound for pound, and we can get that extra help to Turkey and Syria too.
Lancashire police say their search for missing mother of two Nicola Bulley has moved now towards the sea. The force says it's searching further downstream where the River Wyre becomes tidal. Officers have also issued a 48-hour dispersal order for St Michael's on Wyre after an abandoned house was reportedly searched by members of the public trying to solve the case themselves, and then posted footage on social media. The 45-year-old was last seen 13 days ago walking her dog. Members of Parliament will get a 2.9% pay rise from the 1st of April. That will bring their overall salary from around £84,000 to £86,000. The Independent Parliamentary Standards Authority says the pay increase for MPs was the same as the average increase in pay for public sector employees last year. And the former Culture Secretary Nadine Dorries has announced she's standing down as an MP at the next general election. Miss Dorries, who represents Mid-Bedfordshire, has been an MP since 2005 and has said she loved serving her constituents for the best part of 2 decades. Now, ambulance service workers in England are going on strike again tomorrow in a long-running dispute over pay and staffing levels. Around 15,000 staff will take part in the walkout, with Unison members balloting another 10,000 over the coming weeks. The union says the government's sitting it out and waiting for the next pay round, not trying to negotiate a deal. But the government says they are having constructive talks with unions. That's it. You're up to date on TV, online and DAB+ radio. This is GB News. Back now to Dan Wootton tonight.
Time for tomorrow's News Tonight now in our Media Buzz. The first front pages are in. They need your help now, says the Metro, as it launches an appeal for donations to aid the Turkey-Syria rescue efforts as the death toll approaches 20,000. The Eye leads with news that untreated sewage water is being discharged directly into the River Colne by Thames Water. My superstar panel back with me now. Political commentator Dominique Samuels, the former Conservative London mayoral candidate Sean Bailey, and the writer and broadcaster Amy Nicol. Now, the president of war-torn Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky, made a historic visit to the UK yesterday, and he used the occasion to make this unambiguous plea for even more military support.
Yes, Speaker. Is the helmet of a real Ukrainian pilot. He is one of our most successful aces, and he's one of our kings. And the writing on the helmet reads, "We have freedom, give us wings to protect it."
Zelensky's demand comes despite Rishi Sunak seeming to have ruled out increases in defence spending. Brits facing a severe cost of living crisis and a dangerous invasion of illegal migrants. He may sound confident that he'll get what he wants, but the experts aren't so sure.
There's a bit of symbolism involved in what he's asking for at the present moment. Actually, the Ukrainians are very good building things themselves. You're going to look at everything, but in some cases you're up against reality rather than anything else. The fact is that we haven't used air power. But in the old negotiating context, you ask for the fast jets and you get helicopters and you get the missiles to do with that. This guy is quite experienced at that. He's got a huge emotional following.
So despite that dose of reality, the MSM, Parliament, even the King, all unequivocally back Zelensky's plea. And most disturbingly, no one seems to have bothered to engage in a single second of meaningful debate about what would be a monumental geopolitical decision that could have huge earth-shattering ramifications. So I think it's time to have that discussion now. Should the UK supply Ukraine with multi-million-pound jets, or is that a cost too far that could actually end up escalating the conflict, Dominique Samuels?
I completely believe that this decision will escalate the war, and I think we need to have a long, hard look at whether we can afford to be doing all of this and for how long. I mean, you mentioned
that Rishi announced that he's actually not going to increase defence spending when there's literally a war going on our doorstep. Does that make any sense to you? Does that sound like a sensible decision? We have been routinely reducing the size of our army. Does that make sense? Not replacing our weapon stocks. Meanwhile, you've got Boris the buffoon going around demanding that we send everything we've got to them. Can we afford to do this? And I think, you know, look, I understand that Ukrainian people are suffering. I completely understand. But as even the French President Macron said, we need to ensure that we are actually not depleting our own forces. Macron has said arms supply must not deplete French forces. We need to think about that in our country as well and think about whether or not we should be putting ourselves first, and that's a real question.
Sean Bailey, you disagree with Dominique, don't you, on this?
I think we've been so committed to the Ukraine, and if we're going to keep that commitment, we have to look at it. Now, I wouldn't just send jets at this point. It's a long-term commitment, a very expensive commitment, and Ben Wallace has said that we can achieve the same military outcomes through providing advanced missiles, which would be significantly cheaper and, of course, wouldn't need any significant manpower from Britain's point of view on the ground. But we can't stop halfway. If we want this war to end, we have to demonstrate to Russia that we are prepared to back Ukraine. But I will say this, providing jets would be a significant uptick from us, and we'd have to think very carefully before doing that. But it does allow us to say to the Russians, look, we can and will do this, but please put us in a position where we don't have to.
Isn't it very disturbing, though, when there is just no political debate in our parliament between all of our major parties whatsoever? Because I think about the last couple of years, and I think about the moments where there has been virtually no political opposition, the ridiculous COVID lockdowns that are costing our country dearly, and also the COVID vaccines and the vaccine rollout, where there was absolutely no opposition to jabbing very, very young people who didn't actually need to be vaccinated against an illness that would not have had any real harms to them. And I'm a bit concerned that increasingly now we seem to be having one political orthodoxy about most major issues.
One political...
I would to not have a deep debate is always a problem.
But we're not.
Hold on. But nobody's made a commitment to change our current stance. The PM has said he's not going to do that for the time being. Rishi was very clear about that. We are not going to be providing jets.
He was extremely enthusiastic at the press conference.
He was.
And there's also no politician brave enough to say publicly, actually, no, there's a limit. Now, you're with Sean, not Dominique, on this. Is that right, Amy?
Completely. I think that when you look at the whole story of how this invasion came to be, that moment that Crimea was, that they entered Crimea, the reaction was these non-decisions, these soft approaches, these sanctions. We've done all that, and now I think hard defence is our best security because we've tried everything. So
I wouldn't say that we've tried everything. We've been flirting with the idea of Ukraine joining NATO, flirting with the idea of them joining the European Union, flirting with the idea of hosting missiles in Poland.
And look,
we've been doing a lot.
I just think we need to be very worried about the lack of debate. We will have the debate on this show. The debate is being had in the US, where Republican politicians are brave enough to talk about some of the downsides of the consistent...
Like depleting our own weapon stocks. They are low, both in America and here. Germany is sceptical about this, as is France. At some point we have to say no.
Germany and other European nations have always been sceptical about supporting Ukraine. And let's be clear, we're not saying let's run over there and hand out planes. Two things that need to happen. Firstly, we need to look at the military use of that, but also the diplomatic use of that. Will it change the conversation we're having with Russia?
Oh, well, if you look at your pal, I don't know if he is your pal, but Tobias Elwood, he's saying that we need to go in all guns blazing. We can't just leave it to Ukraine. We need to go in fighting. Mr. 77th Brigade.
Look, I want to move on just in case you're with us at the top of the show. Amy Nicole made a completely untrue claim about me, and I wanted Amy to go away and get some evidence of her claim. So, Amy, you said... we were talking about the Lee Anderson story, and you said, very rich coming from you, someone who relishes taking the mick out of Angela Rayner's accent. Now, do you have any evidence that I've ever taken the mick out of Angela Rayner's accent?
Do you know, I would like to apologise for that that detail that I added.
OK, good.
I think I momentarily got you confused with your fans, your side of politics.
Good. But you admit that that was a lie?
No, well, it was a slight exaggeration. It was a mistake. It was a mistake.
It was a lie.
But it is a truth that you have been very critical of Angela Rayner, and you like to call her Randy Rayner. Well, you may not have criticised her accent. You have criticised her lifestyle, her relationships, and also her hair colour.
And do you want to know why? Do you want to know why?
Ginger grab.
It was because
you don't agree with her.
No. It was because of this.
You cannot get any worse than a bunch of scum, homophobic, racist, misogynistic, absolute vile, banana republic, vile, nasty, Etonian, privilege, piece of scum.
That's what it was about. But look, I accept your apology. Now, it's not just up in Scotland that trans rights are causing controversy, with America's former University of Kentucky swimmer Riley Gaines speaking out against the baffling and, in my opinion, disgusting decision to put a biological male athlete, Leah Thomas, in a female changing room with no forewarning to other athletes. Watch this.
Share a locker room with Leah Thomas?
Yes. The NCAA, of course, we competed against Thomas, but we were not forewarned beforehand that we would be sharing a locker room with Leah. We did not give our consent. They did not ask for our consent. But in that locker room, we turned around and there's a 6'4" biological man dropping his pants and watching us undress. And we're exposed to male genitalia.
Honestly, where will this madness end? Perhaps Scheming Sturgeon would actually be happier stateside. Amy Nicole, Sean Bailey, Dominic Samuels, do stand by. I know, it's so shocking, isn't it? We're going to look more at this story next week, actually. But coming up, is American civil rights activist Reverend Al Sharpton right to claim that Meghan was a victim of racism within the royal family because she was the first black C-suite executive in the firm? I'm going to get the thoughts of my superstar panel on this at 10:30. But next, very excited, we're going to have a world-exclusive interview with the comedy legend and GB News star John Cleese. This is about the relaunch of Fawlty Towers and his new job right here. So it's the first time John Cleese is going to be on GB News. We're standing by for him straight after the break.
He's the king of breakfast TV, and he's back. Eamon Holmes, back on the TV with me this morning.
Even remember my name.
I know, it's been 4 months. You have holy water by your bed?
Oh, yes. Already to bless.
Yeah. Oh, Eamon. Oh.
Why do you not believe anything I say?
Eamon Holmes back on GB News Breakfast at 6 a.m.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit off.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions those days are gone, I can tell you. She's only teasing. Go on. He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Jubes and Kerr. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
This year on GB News, we've got brand new members in the family.
Join us. Across the entire United Kingdom, we cover the issues that matter to you. GB News will always stay honest, balanced and fair. We want to hear whatever is on your mind, and we don't talk down to you.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you. Britain's watching.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank. My father didn't love me. So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi, Andrew Pierce here. Join me every Friday lunchtime for a proper no-nonsense debrief of the week's events. With special guests in the studio and the GB News team on the ground, I'll be getting you up to date with news, some intelligent discussion, and my own sharp take. The weekend starts here with me every Friday lunchtime on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
John Cleese, welcome to GB News. It feels great saying that. I'm very excited.
Well, I'm excited because I'm doing this show with you. I've been working with a couple of guys on it, and the whole idea of being able to create a show from scratch without anyone looking over our shoulders. I mean, I wouldn't get an offer like this anywhere else on the planet. It's extraordinary. And I'm really looking forward to it because I think that there are so many cliches in ordinary television. It would be nice just to try and avoid those, just as a start.
Well, look, I have to say, we've been going 18 months now. I've been here since day one, and I have no editorial interference from management in my show. They let me do what I want to do, and you wouldn't get that in any other broadcaster in the UK.
No. It's a sort of trust that we had when we started Monty Python. We went in to see Michael Mills, who was the head of Light Entertainment, and he said, "Well, what sort of a show are you guys planning to do? What would you like to do?" And we hadn't discussed it.
And look at what it became.
Well, we looked at each other and sort of said, well, we're going to do a humorous show with comedy intended to make people laugh. And he said, well, you're going to have guest stars. And we said, are we going to have... And it was an absolute car crash of an interview. And after about a minute, he looked at us and shrugged and said, well, go away and make 13 programs.
My goodness.
No one in the history of television has trusted a group like that. And of course, a lot of people at the BBC hated it. I mean, the guy in charge of the department, in charge of Michael, Tom Sloan, absolutely hated it. He bumped into the director in the elevator and he said, what is this awful show? Is it supposed to be funny? I can't stand it. This is the guy in charge of the department. But, if you actually let people create and have new ideas instead of sort of, what do they call them? That kind of parenting. What is it? Hovercraft painting? No.
Yes.
Helicopter parenting. That's what you get in television because nobody trusts anyone. They've got to be in charge and in control. And that's exactly what's wrong in most television.
But of course, GB News, not your only TV project, John. I don't know if you're aware because you're not in the UK at the moment, but you have been on the front pages of all of the newspapers all week because of your decision.
Well, it was a slow news week.
It must have been. But no, this is huge news, though, John. Faulty Towers, is it really true? Is it coming back with you as Basil?
Yes, it is, but in a very, very different form. You see, I mean, people asked me for years, are you going to do some more? And I said, both Connie Booth and I, we wrote the 12. We wrote the 12 episodes together, and we both felt we'd done it. And Connie retired from show business, and I moved on. And people often said, well, why don't you know the Fawlty Towers? And I said, because people will say, yeah, it was quite good, but it wasn't as good as the other. You see what I mean? And then my daughter met a guy, and they chatted briefly. And we were all in Las Vegas together because I was doing a show with her. And we had dinner, and we suddenly realized, well, if you do a sequel, it, first of all, is interesting, and secondly, does not rely upon, of course, Manuel, dear Andy Sachs, who's not with us anymore, and Prue Scales, as is generally known, as difficulty remembering stuff now. And certainly almost everyone else is dead, because when I look at old clips now, all these wonderful English character actors who aren't with us anymore. And suddenly we thought, well, if the only continuing character is Basil, and my daughter and I, because we've been writing together for 16 years, which people don't know, we thought we could come up with something quite surprising. And then we thought, but where? And we thought, no, not in a small English town, much more fun and much more different if it's, say, a Caribbean island or something like that, with a small Bijou hotel, but with a few very rich people coming to stay and demand.
Oh, that is going to be brilliant. That is going to be brilliant. So a bit of a White Lotus vibe.
What, say again?
A bit of a White Lotus vibe.
Well, you know, that's what my wife was saying to me yesterday. Because if you put it in the Caribbean, it becomes very, very multiracial. You know, people in the hotel business, they're just from everywhere. Today I've had chatting to people from Austria, Kenya, Nepal. And so you can bring lots of different people together. And also, you see, the characteristic of Fawlty Towers was the sort of pressure cooker atmosphere that you created in the hotel. Although I have to tell you, the guy who commissioned the show, after the very first show, he said, John, you're going to have to get them out of the hotel more. Completely wrong. But in this
well, I'm glad you didn't listen to him. Now look, John.
Well, that's because he was in charge. I don't tend to listen to people in charge.
I've got that over the years. Yeah, I've got that point. Now, look, John, you're annoying all the right people with this announcement.
Who am I annoying?
Well, can I tell you what The Guardian said about the return of your show? I think, by the way, the greatest TV show ever made. They said, an anti-woke nightmare. Why the Fawlty Towers remake is a truly nauseating idea.
Yes, well, they obviously know better than I do what's going to be in it. So maybe they should write an episode for me that they would find acceptable. It might not be very funny, but I'm sure it would really please some of their readers.
Indeed. Now, John, no broadcaster announced. Obviously, you have had a few words to say about the BBC over recent years.
Yes.
Would you consider doing this version of Fawlty Towers, this sequel with the BBC?
Oh, because you wouldn't get the freedom. You see, I was terribly lucky, Dan. I was working for the BBC in the late 60s, 70s, beginning of the 80s. That was the best time because the BBC was run by people with real personality who loved the medium, and they were operating out of confidence, which was okay because there wasn't so much competition in these days. Then John Burt came in and said, if we don't match the listening or viewing figures that the commercial channels are getting, we'll get our license revoked. So then they started going for the biggest audiences, and they tended to go for the lowest common denominator, while always denying that they were doing. But if you took a paper now from 1985 and looked at the television shows that are available that evening and compare what they are now, it means, and I believe this, that basically in Britain we've gone from what was a middle-class culture with all its failings to a tabloid culture. And that is why there's so much of this screaming at people. You see, I want to deal with a lot of the subjects that get people upset, but I want to get sensible people with a sense of humor who will listen to each other and who will trade arguments instead of simply making speeches.
Yeah. Indeed, and that's what we try and do on GB News. Always have both sides of the argument to have a respectful debate, but don't shut people down simply because they don't agree with the orthodoxy. OK, so Fawlty Towers will have a new home. It will not be on the BBC. That's big news. Of course, the BBC in recent years has even started to censor or offer trigger warnings on old episodes of Fawlty Towers. So I think what you're saying is correct.
There's a huge argument about wokery, and some of it springs from a very good idea, which is let's try to be kind to people. But I believe it's become far too dominated by people who are frightened of offending people. And I think you have to allow offence. And you say, well, do you want people to be shouting racial epithets at people? And the answer is no, but I don't think prison is a correct sanction. Do you see what I mean?
Indeed, it's the tyranny of woke. It's the tyranny of woke.
Well, yes, but there's lots of good angles to work. But then it goes to the crazy extremes, like the New Statesman. I did see one thing last night. The New Statesman said, it's going to be bloody awful about my show. And I want to say, well, do you really know what it's going to be like? And the idea that it's all going to be about wokery hadn't particularly occurred to me. I mean, the show I'm doing, the Dinosaur Hour, the show I'm doing for GB News, that will deal with those kind of things. But I don't see that would be relevant to a small bijou hotel that's run in the Caribbean. So they are assuming, with no evidence at all, that they know what the show's going to be like and condemning it for that. And that is neither criticism nor journalism.
No, and it sums up our media culture today. Well, look, John, we are so excited about the return of Fawlty Towers, but I have to say, from the GB News family, we're most excited about having you here later this year, right?
It is very special. Having me on your channel is enormously special for you.
Well, we cannot wait. Thank you so much, John, and we'll speak soon.
Please call your wife immediately.
Simon! She's in the hospital, you silly girl!
Yes, call her there.
I can't! I've got too much to do. Listen, don't mention the war. I mentioned it once, but I think I got away with it all right. So, it's all forgotten now, and let's hear no more about it. So that's 2 egg mayonnaise, a prawn Goebbels, a Hermann Goring, and 4 colded salads.
I couldn't resist. Now, coming up in Uncancelled, with the new deputy chair of the Tory party, Lee Anderson, throwing his support behind capital punishment. Should we bring back the death penalty to fix lawless Britain? Fleet Street icon Calvin McKenzie joins me live on this at 10:45. But next in the media buzz, with US civil rights activist Reverend Al Sharpton claiming that Meghan was treated differently due to being the first black person in the royal family to take on executive duties. Does he have a point? Or is this nothing more than race baiting? My superstar panel are going to weigh in on this controversial subject straight after the break.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me.
So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
The guy went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions.
I have no time for cultural totalitarianism.
We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online, across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi, Andrew Pierce here. Join me every Friday lunchtime for a proper no-nonsense debrief of the week's events. With special guests in the studio and the GB News team on the ground, I'll be getting you up to date with news, some intelligent discussion, and my own sharp take. The weekend starts here with me every Friday lunchtime on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Lawrence Fox, on GB News. Frank, fun, fearless, and sometimes serious. Much as I love a Friday night punch-up, what I really want is a battle of ideas. I want to look at things differently. I want to hear different voices and engage with your unique experiences. Every Friday at 7 p.m. on GB News.
Let's return to tomorrow's news tonight now in our Media Buzz. More front pages have been delivered in The Guardian. Reports on the historic vote by the Church of England's governing body that will see same-sex civil marriages to be blessed by priests as early as this summer. Individual churches will be encouraged to state clearly whether they offer the blessings to avoid disappointment. The Daily Mirror reports that finance guru Martin Lewis warns raising the cap on energy bills would be a national act of harm. And the Daily Star leads with comedy legend Paul Chuckle unveiling a manifesto to get people laughing again by ending cancel culture, which has made too many comedians dull. And he wants to have more TV shows like Fawlty Towers. Well, I hope he caught the interview before the break with John Cleese. I think it's going to be absolutely hilarious, actually, and the fact The Guardian are dead against it makes me want it to succeed even more. But my superstar panel are back with me now. The political commentator Dominique Samuels, the former Conservative London mayoral candidate Sean Bailey, and the writer and broadcaster Amy Nicol. Now, the royal race row, sparked by unproven smears from the Sussexes, exploded back into life this week. Race-baiting American civil rights activist Reverend Al Sharpton told the very woke Good Morning Britain that Meghan was treated differently because she was the first black person in the monarchy to be in the so-called C-suite of the firm, which effectively means she was carrying out executive duties on behalf of the royal family. Look.
I think that when they were married, it was a beautiful day.
Right.
And people were celebrating how you saw this woman of color now in the royal family, gospel songs sung at the ceremony, the Queen sitting there. And then the reaction was so much acrimony and just looking to treat her differently. And people, whether you're in the UK or around the world, that was always treated differently, understood what Meghan was going through. It was somebody black working in the C-suites for the first time, and they treat you differently.
But given Prince Harry himself has actually now backtracked on his claims of royal racism, is this just yet another example of a woke American trying to bring down our royal family with an irresponsible and unproven claim of racism, Dominique?
We're talking about Al Sharpton here. Al Sharpton is notorious in America for this sort of racial catastrophism that people like him like to promote. He likes division, and he's bringing it here. But I'll just say, mate, you're American. Stick to creating racial division in America instead of sticking your nose into what's going on here, because quite clearly from that spiel, he doesn't know what the hell he's talking about. It wasn't about racism. Yes, some people did have an issue with Meghan and her race, but the vast majority didn't. And number two, the reason why it didn't work out is because I think Meghan and Harry wanted everything their way. They didn't get it their way, so they left. Can we please stop talking about it? And can we please stop wheeling out these people that are just relentlessly hammering this narrative? It's boring.
Well, he's like Dr. Scholler, isn't he, Sean Bailey, really? Because I think what he's trying to do is create a narrative and rewrite history. Because what he can't deny, what Sharpton can't deny, is that the whole country came behind Meghan and Harry to celebrate the union. So it's this desperate grasping at straws to say, oh, but actually, then you turned against Meghan because she was a royal executive. I mean, what does he mean? There's no C-suite in the royal family anyway. And actually, why, if the British public are so racist towards Meghan, did we celebrate her wedding so overwhelmingly?
I mean, he said in his own comments that their wedding was a real celebration. It's a real sweet moment.
Yeah.
And people in the black community were genuinely excited about having Meghan in the royal family. And
but in every community.
But here's my point, Dan. It felt like that beyond the black community as well. You're having conversations with people about the royals that you normally wouldn't have. But I think he's also slightly missed the point in that to be a royal woman is very, very hard. To be any kind of royal, but to be a woman in particular seems to be very hard. Diana had her challenges, Fergie, Camilla, Sophie had her challenges as well. So
even Kate, Waity Katie.
Exactly. So it's a tough role, and I think sometimes, because of what happened to Meghan, it looks unique, but any of those women could argue that they had a unique experience and not always positive. So it's about perspective and how you judge a thing.
Amy, are you prepared to condemn Reverend Al Sharpton here, because he is trying to paint a false picture of what happened?
Well, I think that actually in this instance you are creating a false image of what happened.
No, I'm not.
Because it is simply a fact that there were direct stories that were identical about both Kate and Meghan.
You're not going to do this again, are you?
Well, I could say the same to you. Why are we even having this conversation again? But it is the fact.
Because Reverend Al Sharpton, who is one of the most famous civil rights activists in America, who is a household name, has gone on British television to accuse the British public of being racist. Now, I'm sorry,
Meghan
that is a
differently
story.
from her royal peers, such as Kate. So when Kate has an avocado, it's very different to when Meghan has an avocado. When Kate wears white, it's very different to when Meghan wears white.
The thing
so
I would say
is that? And I think you can say, oh, it's just because I dislike Meghan, which probably is the case, but you also can't deny that racism played a role. When her mother was first in the papers, who's a yoga teacher, people accused her of being a drug dealer. That was quite a low moment. The exotic DNA incident, there are so many.
The important thing is, hold on.
What about all of the positive headlines? Yeah, just while you're speaking, Sean, I want to show you all of the positive headlines, because Amy loves to raise about 3 articles. You know, there were literally thousands and thousands of articles. These were the positive headlines.
But I think this is the whole thing about subconscious bias, isn't it? You can sit there and be like, I'm not aware of it, I don't know about it.
Are you going to talk about microaggressions
but why invalidate that? Why not discuss that and acknowledge that?
It's not an invalidation.
Well, you wouldn't, would you? Because it's subconscious.
It's not an invalidation. And from Al Sharpton's point of view, you remember, he has spoken to the Sussexes, and that's what they've told him, and he's replayed that.
But they told lie after lie.
But for him, they're correct.
Yeah, but I'm sorry, Dominique, what makes me so angry is Amy saying to me, oh, no, Dan, you and the British people aren't racist. You're just subconsciously racist. No, we are not.
That is what you would say if it was subconscious.
Yeah, I think, to be honest, I think that this whole idea of it all being subconscious actually has the opposite effect, and it allows people to escape accountability for when real instances
if you're racist, own it. But actually, if you're not, then be prepared to say that you're not. So you think that you, as a middle-class white woman, you're subconsciously racist, are you?
I think subconscious bias exists within our society.
Are you subconsciously racist?
You're trying to trap me into saying I am this or I am that.
This is the idea.
I think that actually
everyone wants to talk about subconscious
everyone
racism.
in this room is...
Look, well, I'm talking about you.
I'm
are
sorry.
You subconsciously racist?
Dan, I'm going to have to say I'm not racist. I'm not. I'm really not.
This is the thing.
I love that everyone in this room, including Dominique and Sean. OK, so now we've got white Amy saying that Sean and
that's what every time we talk about race, this is what it
everyone has
I'm not allowed
subconscious
to have an
bias,
opinion.
except the person that's saying that everyone has a subconscious bias. So when I ask
you directly, are you subconsciously racist? You won't say you are, but you think the rest of us are.
You're trying to pin me into saying I'm a racist, so you can put it together and be like, Amy says this ridiculous thing, and I'm not really going to have that. All I'm saying is I would agree that that there is
do you
systemic...
think I'm subconsciously racist?
I think there's systemic
Do you think I'm
racism
subconsciously
within
racist?
the UK, and I think
Do you think
subconscious
I'm
bias
subconsciously racist?
is something that permeates
Do you think I'm
British
subconsciously racist?
society.
Do you do that then?
Pardon?
Do you perpetuate unconscious
I think our
bias?
society does.
So, but you don't?
No, I'm part of the society,
Society's
but I
made
don't.
up of
I'm
individuals.
reluctant.
And what about me?
I'm really
What about
reluctant
me?
to
Am
sit
I-
here and say.
Answer the question.
Amy, am I subconsciously racist?
As I've said, I think everyone in our British society,
Including Sean and Dominic.
you're reducing it.
No. I'll tell you what I'm doing.
You're reducing
I'm exposing the ridiculousness of your argument by using specifics.
I
And
think
I'm glad
you
that
think
I
it's
have
something
Amy
really
Nicole, Sean
different to what
Bailey,
it is.
Dominic Samuels. Thank you so much. Now, coming up, we've shown their front page, but we'll left-wing rag The Guardian when our greatest Britain tonight, or our union jackass. We'll see. This nomination involves the great Neil Oliver, so stand by. But next, in Uncancelled, should Britain consider bringing back the death penalty, as suggested by tough-talking Tory Deputy Chair Lee Anderson? Calvin Mackenzie is going to be live on that in just 2 minutes' time, so don't go anywhere.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me.
So anyway...
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi, Andrew Pierce here. Join me every Friday lunchtime for a proper no-nonsense debrief of the week's events. With special guests in the studio and the GB News team on the ground, I'll be getting you up to date with news, some intelligent discussion, and my own sharp take. The weekend starts here with me every Friday lunchtime on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512.
Virgin Media Channel 604.
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236. And YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's time now for Uncancelled. And this is where Britain's top commentators speak out on controversial issues without the fear of the cancel culture sweeping the rest of the media. From migrants to food banks, newly elected Tory Deputy Chairman Lee Anderson has rocked the jerry political discourse in this country. And he's continuing to earn his moniker as Westminster's toughest talking MP after calling for the return of the death penalty. Speaking to The Spectator this week, Lee said, "Nobody has ever committed a crime after being executed. You know that, don't you? 100% success rate." And that's not new, by the way. His position is not new because on this show, a couple of weeks ago, he said that the Afghan monster Loranging Abdulrahimzai, triple murdering asylum seeker who evaded authorities by posing as a 14-year-old schoolboy, deserved the death penalty too.
He's a creature, he's not a man. He's a creature that's murdered abroad, he's come here, he's told lies. He's been put in foster care. It's cost the British taxpayer thousands and thousands of pounds. And now we're going to put him in prison for 20 odd years. It's going to cost the British taxpayer thousands and thousands of pounds again. That's not the answer. And I think the answer is, and I'll say this with a heavy heart, it's probably at the end of a rope. I believe in the death penalty for cases like this.
Now, Calvin Mackenzie, predictably, there has been utter, complete and well, I'd call it confected outrage. Confected outrage today from the political and media establishment because they want to bring Lee Anderson down. But you actually agree with them, don't you, Calvin?
Well, I've always believed in the death penalty. And actually, it's a stunning interview, by the way, the like of which I very much doubt many other Tory MPs would like to go publicly on it, but they probably believe it in their hearts, is he talks about people say, well, you can make mistakes. And he's saying, well, not with video, you can't. And the case that he cites, of course, is the dreadful case, the dreadful Islamic murder of Lee Rigby, the soldier in Woolwich, in which the murder is captured on CCTV. And he says, under those circumstances, why should those guys, one in particular, be given the rest of their lives in a rather nice cell, 3 meals a day, having butchered in such a vile way, and it based on kind of ISIS kind of thought process. So what would be wrong in that case? Why would anybody want to keep that person alive? Now, I often hear the case that actually it's a moral issue. Those that kill should not be killed because it is fundamentally wrong. We don't have the right to take away somebody's life. I disagree with that. And not only that, I see lots of examples. There seems to be more and more examples today of shocking murders where actually, when you say to somebody, that's 30 years, what does that really mean to them? You know, what does that really mean to society? Has society got its revenge? Now, in the court case, you have impact statements now.
Mm-hmm.
Why can't we have impact statements where two things happen? Supposing in the impact statement, the actual mother, the father, the brother, the sister said, actually, we would like to see that person die for this crime, right? Or say, instead of 50% off, you're going to get 10% off or 2% off. I think that the families who are most affected, who have to live with this tragedy in their hearts and in their minds for the rest of their life, should have a vote. But look, Lee Anderson has said a lot of things which are really quite incredible. I mean, for instance, he also makes the point about benefits. He said, I get attacked morning, noon and night. These are really vile socialists, right? They should be dissociated by Starmer, but I doubt whether they will. And the point he makes is that I have raised 2 children as a single household. I had to flog a car because I couldn't afford to run it. I had my last £5 had to go into the gas meter, essentially. He said, he's coming from the position, you couldn't be more skint than me. So don't try and tell me when I turn around and say,
and he works 7 days a week.
Universal credits too. Sorry.
He works, well, I was just going to say, he worked 7 days a week during that tough period. Not only did he sell his car to walk to work, he was working 7 days a week. But, Colin, just on the death penalty, what has fascinated me today is if you watch any of the MSM coverage, you would think that he was spouting a fringe view. A view maybe that 5% of Brits might agree with, for example. A YouGov poll just last month, Colin, and by the way, this is not an outlier. This is what all of the polling shows. But a YouGov poll last month found that 52%, so the same percentage of Brits who voted for Brexit, think the death penalty should apply in cases of multiple murder. So Lee Anderson is speaking for the majority of the country.
Well, of course, we aren't effectively allowed to have a death penalty in an odd way, because we can't even send back illegal migrants to countries where a death penalty is carried out. And that, by the way, can be the United States, unbelievably, right? But it's certainly the whole of the Middle East, etc., right? So we can't so somebody comes and murders here. If they come from Iran and they've got some children here, we can't send them back. These are impossible things. And what Lee Anderson has done, and I do congratulate him for him. I don't agree with everything he said, but I do congratulate him, is he brought this big issue into the spotlight, because this won't go away now.
No, it won't.
He also has almost certainly meant that the constituents of Ashfield will, in fact, actually probably more likely vote for him than in other red wall seats where the other MPs are much more liberal.
Couldn't agree more, and that's why Sunak needs to stand by him. Calvin McKenzie, thank you so much, Calvin. Have a great week, and we will speak on Monday night. But it is time now to reveal today's greatest Britain and Union jackass. My superstar panel return. Dominic Samuels, who is your greatest Britain nominee?
Mine is GB News presenter Neil Oliver. He's been under some extremely unwarranted fire, and I think he's a champion for free speech and a credit to GB News.
Hear, hear. Hear, hear. Sean Bailey, your nominee.
My honorary greatest Britain is Volodymyr Zelensky. I've completely butchered his name, but his impassioned speech to Parliament was such a demonstration of courage. Remember, this is a man who was offered safe passage to the US, and he decided to stay and be with his nation and represent them as best he can, and I think that's great.
Is that so?
Yes, it is.
And Amy Nicole, your nominee.
Admittedly, a bit of a gear change, but I've picked a pop star called Elodie C because it's Children's Mental Health Week, and she has been touring schools to spread awareness of mental health and also do some performances. She supported Little Mix on their tour, and she's really awesome, and I'd love it if everyone would check her out.
Well, of course, it's no question to me, the greatest Britain is Neil Oliver. And you know why folk want to silence him, because his voice is so important, and he will be back here on Monday night on this show. Dominic Samuels, your Union jackass.
Following on from the theme, my Union jackass is The Guardian for the disgusting hit piece that they put out trying to paint Neil Oliver as some sort of anti-Semite for talking about globalism and talking about the fact that there are a number of people that want to shred our democracy. It's not anti-Semitic to talk about that. It's really dangerous.
Language.
It's really dangerous to throw out those sorts of accusations.
This is absolutely despicable. The Guardian is feeling emboldened because they came for... Well, first they actually came for myself and Nigel Farage, trying to claim that we were anti-Semites for using the word globalist. Then they came for the great Mark Steyn and had some success there. And so now they're moving on to Neil Oliver. Well, they're not going to win. They're not going to win, but it's despicable. Sean Bailey, your nominee.
My Union jackass nominee is the press and politicians trying to reignite the Brexit debate. We don't have a time machine to go back. We need to focus on what we're going to do in the future. And any politician who talks about the effect Brexit has without mentioning the effect that lockdown has, you know it's politically motivated. We need to move forward. We need to get the Brexit bump.
And Amy Nicole, your nominee.
It's Boris Johnson, who made £2.5 million from speaking in other larks, yet can't pay his 200,000 legal fees for Partygate.
So funny.
Why are we footing that bill?
Prime Minister. You didn't want him to stay as Prime Minister. Now that he's no longer Prime Minister, you don't want him to make money.
Oh, no, I want him to make money, but I want him to pay for his own doings.
For his own what?
Doings. I want him to fund the bill for Partygate investigations.
Oh, he doesn't want this investigation. None of us do. It's a political stitch-up, Amy Nicole.
Oh, my goodness. He can pay for it.
But look, I'm going with Dominic on this and The Guardian for the reasons that I outlined. They know what they're doing. Dominic Samuels, Sean Bailey, Amy Nicole, my fabulous superstar panel this Thursday. Thank you for your company all week. It's been a dramatic one, but I will be back on Monday.
This year on GB News, we've got brand new members in the family.
Join us. Across the entire United Kingdom, we cover the issues that matter to you. GB News will always stay honest, balanced and fair. We want to hear whatever is on your mind.
And we don't talk down to you.
The establishment had their chance.
Now we're here to represent you.
Britain's watching.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, right across the nation. You can get us on television, on radio, on digital. We're absolutely everywhere.
Amazing. You see, amazing.
You remind me of me in the European Parliament. But here's the most important bit. We are not part of the mainstream establishment. We think and speak just like you do. We are the People's Channel.
Magnificent. That's really, really thoughtful.
Come and join us on GB News, the People's News Channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. We are GB News, the People's Channel.
Why not take us home with you by visiting the GB News shop at gbnews.store? You'll find all the official merchandise, a really good present actually for yourself, your friends or your family.
We ship across the UK mainland at no extra cost. GB News, the People's Channel.
Join me, Lawrence Fox, on GB News. Frank, fun, fearless and sometimes serious. Much as I love a Friday night punch-up, what I really want is a battle of ideas. I want to look at things differently. I want to hear different voices and engage with your unique experiences. Every Friday at 7 p.m. on GB News.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me.
So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Good evening, you're with GB News. It's 11 o'clock. In a moment, headliners. But first, let's bring you the latest news headlines. And more than 20,000 people are now known to have died after Monday's earthquakes in southern Turkey and northern Syria. Around 70 members of the UK International Search and Rescue Team have joined the effort to try to locate people in the rubble. The Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, says the government is doing everything it can to help.
I, as a dad, watching parents try and find their young children in the rubble is heartbreaking. And we will do everything that we can to help Turkey. I already said that to the President when I spoke to him a couple of days ago. And what the government's also said is that we will match all of the country's donations pound for pound. So if anyone can give to the Disasters Emergency Committee, then the government will match your donation pound for pound and we can get that extra help to Turkey and Syria too.